I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 136 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, and I'd like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be addressed through the chair. Members, please raise your hand if you wish to speak, whether participating in person or via Zoom, and the clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we are able. And pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on November 21st, 2024, the committee commences its study of the impacts of President-elect Donald Trump's announced measures on border security and migration. And I'd like to sincerely welcome our esteemed guests today. Thank you for honoring us with your time. We know certainly that Canadians are anxious about this topic in particular, so we look forward to your comments and your feedback. And we have Canada Border Services Agency, Aaron O'Gorman, President, welcome, and Aaron McCrory, Vice President, Intelligence and Enforcement, welcome. And we have from the RCMP, Michael Duhem, Commissioner, and Mathieu Bertrand, Director General, Serious and Organized Crime and Border Integrity, welcome. I now invite Ms. O'Gorman to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes. Ms. O'Gorman, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the invitation to appear again before this committee. J'aimerais commencer aujourd'hui.
I'd like to start today with a few observations about how the CBSA continues to work closely and productively with its partners, both at home and in the United States. Border Services officers at ports of entry across Canada protect Canadian communities every day by keeping dangerous goods and people out of the country.
Don't operate alone. Organized crime is a multi-jurisdictional endeavor. It would be unrealistic to think that one agency, even one country, could thwart their efforts. That's why CBSA works in lockstep with domestic and international law enforcement partners. For example, domestically, the CBSA conducted 8 joint operations with the Ontario Provincial Police and the Sûreté du Québec alone just this year. Working together, we intercepted hundreds of stolen vehicles and thousands of kilograms of illegal drugs. Just this past Monday, CBSA officers in British Columbia made a major seizure of contraband and prohibited weapons thanks to collaboration with the RCMP's Federal Serious Organized Crime Division. I just would like to add on that same day in Hamilton International Airport, we seized 6 kilograms of suspected cannabis in 3 different shipments destined for France, and among several other seizures that day. I could go on and on. But I will give you another international example. In 2023, my counterpart with the New Zealand Customs Service wrote to CBSA thanking us for sharing vital and timely intelligence that resulted in the largest single drug seizure in New Zealand's history, over 700 kilograms of methamphetamines. We collaborate with countries around the world to stop the illegal import and export of drugs and other criminal activities all the time. What's more, CBSA officers are deployed in 40 missions in 35 countries, which is our way of pushing the border out and preventing criminal elements from coming in the first place. Il va sans dire que notre
It goes without saying that our closest collaboration is with the United States. Cooperation between the CBSA and U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers stretches far and wide. Right across the continent, we talk regularly at points of entry, at my level, and everything in between.
CBSA officials deployed across the United States, including 2 officers embedded with the U.S. CBP Targeting Center in Washington. They collaborate in the international effort to target and track illegal drugs. La SFC et notre homologue américaine.
CBSA and our American counterpart plan infrastructure investments together. We've harmonized our working hours at points of entry and coordinated our operations.
Our officers share the same building. Sometimes the border even cuts through the boardroom. In one case, one half is Canada and the other half is the United States. Our 2 agencies are co-located in Little Gold Creek, Yukon, where the top of the world highway connects Canada and Alaska. We're literally working side by side. And the CBSA collaboration goes beyond its partner agency, the US CBP. We work with the Homeland Security Investigations, the Coast Guard, the Drug Enforcement Agency, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Our partnership with the United States is a two-way relationship characterized by frank and open communication and ongoing problem solving, and that will serve us very well going forward. Thank you.
And I now invite Commissioner Duhem to make an opening statement for up to 5 minutes. Commissioner, go right ahead.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for providing the opportunity to appear before this committee to talk about the RCMP's activities in relation to security at the Canada-U.S. border. I'm joined here with Chief Superintendent Mathieu Bertrand, Director General of Federal Police and Criminal Operations, Serious and Organized Crime, and Border Integrity. I'll begin by providing some background on the RCMP's responsibility and actions with respect to Canada-U.S. border. Les fonctions et les pouvoirs de la GRC en matière.
The RCMP's border security duties and powers are set out in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Act and its regulations, the Customs Act, and the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act and regulations. The RCMP is responsible for protecting Canada's borders between official points of entry from criminal threats entering or leaving the country in all modes, air, land, marine, and the Arctic. To delineate areas of shared responsibility and cooperation in border security, the RCMP and the Canada Border Services Agency have established several memoranda of understanding. The CBSA RCMP MOUs detail the division of responsibilities and specific areas of cooperation and investigative responsibility for border enforcement, border administration, public safety, and supporting national security outcomes.
We are aware border integrity is a priority for the RCMP, and I can assure members of this committee that we continue to work with our portfolio, law enforcement, and Indigenous partners across the country to ensure we are prepared to address any border concerns. The RCMP continues to have regular engagement with its U.S. partners on various fronts, including border integrity, serious and organized crime, and issues related to the change in administration through existing mechanism and fora. The RCMP also participates in numerous cross-border initiatives with the U.S. that allow for joint operations and investigations. Highly integrated, multimodal cross-border teams investigate criminal threats to Canada-U.S. border, including irregular migration and human smuggling. These teams allow for shared communication, improved response time to a border incursion, and enhanced investigative capacity. Furthermore, the RCMP has regular engagement with Indigenous law enforcement partners through the existing integrated border enforcement teams located in the provinces along the Canadian-U.S. border. The RCMP is aware of the cross-border crime goes beyond irregular migration. Canada and the United States are both seized with an overdose crisis that continues to be driven by synthetic drugs, including fentanyl. This crisis continues to have devastating impacts on individuals and communities in both countries. La GRC et ses partenaires comme la SFC sont déterminés à s'attaquer à ce problème.
The RCMP, Canadian Police in general, and federal partners such as the CBSA are committed to tackling this public safety issue and are working at all levels of policing, both in Canada and abroad. You will have seen a number of press conferences and releases on this subject recently. Examples include, firstly, the significant collaboration between the RCMP, the FBI, and other partners in Project Grand Slalom, directed against major criminal organizations producing drug overseas and then shipping them to Canada via the U.S. Secondly, a major seizure at a point of entry of cocaine being shipped north, and finally, several recent dismantlements of synthetic drug labs. It's essential that the RCMP and U.S. law enforcement agencies work closely together to combat the threats posed by these harmful substances both at the border and elsewhere. For example, the RCMP collaborates with the U.S. on the Fentanyl Task Force, the Trilateral Committee on Fentanyl, the North American Dialogue on Drugs, the Global Coalition to Combat Synthetic Drug Threats, and the Canada-U.S. Opioid Action Plan. The Fentanyl Working Group is a bilateral initiative established in 2023. It aims to increase cooperation and information sharing on fentanyl-related trends, investigations, and consumption patterns between various law enforcement and federal government agencies, including the RCMP.
In the U.S. Opioids Action Plan, the RCMP regularly collaborates with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, better known as DEA, by sharing samples of illegal substance seized in Canada for testing through the DEA's drug signature program. This cooperation provides the opportunity for intelligence sharing between our two countries to increase our collective knowledge on drug trends. We remain confident in the ability of Canadian enforcement agencies to work together to maintain the integrity of the Canada-U.S. border and to enforce Canadian laws. With that, I would like again to thank the committee for the opportunity to meet with you. I'll be pleased to answer any of your questions. Merci.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we will start now with our questioning, the first of the Conservatives, and we'll begin with Mr. Shipley of 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to witnesses for being here today. Obviously, in the news lately has been a tremendous amount about the border situation and the 25% tariff that's being thrown around down the States to affect Canadians greatly. There's a lot of Canadians who are very nervous and upset about this. It could be coming forward, could affect a lot of businesses and a lot of people. And now there's even talk retaliation coming back from our side. So it's interesting that this has all happened, appears to have happened so quickly over the last couple of weeks with President-elect Trump's announcement of the issue of having fentanyl and illegal immigration as a problem at our border. Just a week or so ago, we had the minister here, and I asked that minister why it took comments from the President-elect Trump to start acting on this serious situation. And since that meeting, we've actually done some great research and found out that this has been an issue for quite some time. It's been very well known. I have here a meeting note from September 2023, September 2023. The meeting was between the Minister of Public Safety and the Ambassador of the United States, David Cohen, and this is an official document from Public Safety Canada. And this, basically in a nutshell, this talks about in September 2023, Minister LeBlanc met with the U.S. Ambassador David Cohen in a memo prepared for the minister ahead of this meeting with input provided by the CBSA. It stated that topics of interest and concern for the ambassador were fentanyl and illegal immigration at our shared border. My question is for the CBSA individuals here today. Is it fair to say that the Government of Canada and the Minister of Public Safety in particular have been aware of the United States' concerns on these files well in advance of the election of Donald Trump?
So I'm not going to speak for the minister. He's well able to do that himself. I will point out that since taking on this role, I have attended the Cross-Border Crime Forum with both this minister and his predecessor, where fentanyl and drug and firearm smuggling and human smuggling featured prominently in the agenda, and Canada brought as much substance to that meeting as our American colleagues. And out of that, the ministers and the attorneys general recognized the work that we were doing to establish information sharing agreements, told us to hurry up, and asked for feedback in how we were operating together. And we were quite able to give that feedback, and we were operating quite collaboratively together. So I have been in several meetings where these were on the agenda. And like I said, the minister was well briefed by myself and the commissioner in terms of the risks related to it. CBSA has received funding for firearms and drugs in the past few years, as well as addressing irregular migration and stolen vehicles. So the extent to which we have been given additional funding for technology, for detection tools, for
thank you for that. I'm sorry, I have very limited time. And there's a second part to the question, so thank you. What we're really trying to get down to is the root here of when it just seems like the last 2 weeks. This is a big surprise to everybody. Everybody's panicking now, trying to resolve a situation. Further to that meeting that happened in September 2023, there was a meeting in May of 2024 that was quite boastfully posted on X, and I have the post here in my hand in the picture, where the post says, "Good to meet with Minister LeBlanc at the embassy today to discuss how the United States and Canada are working every day to deepen our law enforcement cooperation, secure our shared border, fight the scourge of fentanyl, and combat against the infiltration of transnational criminal organization." So that second meeting happened in May of 2024. So we know there's been 2 meetings about this. This can't be a surprise to anybody within the government. The U.S. ambassador shared this photo on X with his caption, talking about securing the border, fighting the scourge of fentanyl, and combating against the infiltration of criminal organizations. To reiterate, would it be fair to say the Government of Canada and the Minister of Public Safety have been aware of the United States' concerns about fentanyl and illegal immigration well in advance of November 2024?
I would say that there are Canadian concerns about fentanyl and irregular migration and illegal migration. And there are concerns that are shared with the U.S., but they are not U.S. concerns. They are Canadian concerns, and they are the preoccupation of the CBSA every day. And so the minister is well versed in the activities that we take, interested in our seizures, the trends that we're seeing. So these are absolutely Canadian concerns, and that they're Canadian concerns that we're working on every day.
And they've been conceding Canadian concerns, obviously, for a while. Not sure how well they've been dealt with. My last question on this issue is, prior to President-elect Trump raising concerns about activity at our shared border, did the Department of Homeland Security or any other department approach the CBSA with concerns about the issues of fentanyl and illegal immigration?
We talk about it all the time. And just as by way of example, 2 times a year I meet with our Border 5 colleagues. That, of course, includes the U.S., Australia, New Zealand, and the U.K. And my U.S. counterpart and I consistently put fentanyl on that agenda. Fortunately for our other homologues, excuse the French term, it hasn't reached their shores to the extent that it has us. So we put it on the agenda. We discuss it. The Americans aren't pushing Canada. We are sharing information all the time, what we're seeing in terms of trends, precursors, transit, what's coming out of Mexico, what's coming out of China.
Thank you. I
Ms.
would definitely
O'Gorman.
say they're pushing us now.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Thank you, Ms. O'Gorman. And now we will go to the Liberals. Ms. Vanderbilt, you have 6. Oh, I'm so sorry. Mr. McDonald, my apologies. Mr. McDonald, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to continue on some of the questioning by my colleague, Mr. Shipley. And I just wanted to make a reference that the Cross-Border Crime Forum, which I think was just mentioned by the President, was created in 1997. Is that correct?
Could come back to you on that.
Okay. And I know under the previous Conservative government, and I want them to be aware of that forum was disbanded and then reestablished in 2021 or 2022. Is that correct?
As I said, I've attended 2 cross-border crime forum meetings. I believe there was one prior to my taking on this role, but again, we'd have to confirm. But there have been 2 in the last 2 years. Thank you.
And I think first of all, thank you guys for being there today and for what you actually do. And I want to continue on the fentanyl discussion because I think that's seems to be on everybody's radar right now. While Canada and the United States share a joint commitment to securing our shared border to ensure that those who would traffic in fentanyl are stopped, apprehended, disrupted, what have you, can you tell the committee how much fentanyl is entering the United States from Canada? So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague who may have some statistics. The DEA has characterized that amount as slippage, which is to say small amounts for personal use, mostly through postal, but not insignificant amounts, and particularly not in the last couple of years as the economics of the fentanyl coming out of Mexico makes it much, much cheaper. But Aaron, if you have any.
I would just add that in the first 3 quarters of this year, the CBSA seized 4.9 kilograms of fentanyl. For the most part, the biggest seizure was a 4.1 kilogram seizure that was export bound for the Netherlands. And the other seizures were all fairly small personal type seizures that were caught along, I believe, along the land border. I don't have stats that indicate any significant shipments moving south.
Thank you, Mr. McQuarrie. And I may stay with you for a moment. What percentage of fentanyl interdicted by the U.S. originates from Canada? Do you have any of those numbers?
No, I don't have U.S. numbers. I think we'd have to go to USCBP to get that kind of information.
Okay. Thank you.
And when speaking about fentanyl, we often hear law enforcement also talk about precursor chemicals. What is, or can someone describe what a precursor chemical is, where the precursor chemical is developed, and how easy is it to ship a precursor chemical from abroad? Maybe Mr. Duhaime, you may have that information.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, precursors are mostly of them coming from China, and it's a chemical that is most of the times regulated, but some of it's legal to come into Canada because it's used for different use. And that's a challenge that we have both the RCMP and CBSA. When it enters, it is legal, and then when it's transformed through a lab, it becomes meth or fentanyl. So the challenge that we have is really regulating what is actually legal to come into the country.
And
Okay, thank you.
if I may add to that question, just
Certainly.
sorry, to your question about how easy is it to ship. On occasion, we have seen and seized large quantities, vats, that of course look suspicious. But what's difficult is we also see it in smaller containers being shipped through courier. So as we talk to the U.S., that's a collective challenge that we both have in the courier mode, is that it's being shipped in smaller quantities and doesn't register in the same way that some of the large volumes that we've been able to seize at the land border have.
And I know, President O'Gorman, you talked a little bit about some of our successes. And I know under the previous Trump administration, there was increased interjurisdictional collaboration through these forums that we just discussed, like the North American Drug Dialogue and Joint Action Plan on opioids. Can you tell us about the successes and takeaways from these international forums? And have these forums continued to meet post 2020?
The North American Drug Dialogue, actually, the meeting just happened recently, and our senior official responsible for opioids and fentanyl was there, joined with an executive former frontline officer from our BC region, who sadly is quite familiar. It's a bit ground zero for Canada. So the two of them went down along with other colleagues from the public safety portfolio. And the discussions are wide ranging, from wastewater testing to trends to targeting, and disruptive efforts, sharing of intelligence, harm reduction. So they're quite extensive. Health Canada is also represented there, and increasingly they're inviting countries from Europe, again, just to get ahead of what they might be facing, or for those who are starting to find fentanyl coming into their countries as well.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'm not sure how much time I have left.
You have 16 seconds.
Okay, I'll pass that on, Chair. Thank you, and thank you to the witnesses.
Thank you so much. We'll go now to the Bloc québécois avec Ms. Michaud. Vous avez 6 minutes.
Ms. Michaud, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for coming here to this afternoon. And thank you for the work that you do. And I can say that there's very good cooperation between the RCMP, the CBSA, and in the Valleyfield Post, and with Inspector Sirois, we know that there's a lot of cooperation. So I would like to thank you for the work that you do, and thank you on behalf of citizens. My question is with respect to an issue that's been on the agenda. I have an article from Radio Canada that talks about $1 billion is going to be given to border security with the United States and Canada, and that means this is a significant amount of money for the protection of our borders, and to just ease the Mr. President-elect Trump's feelings. The Minister of Public Safety, Dominic LeBlanc, has said that he is going to increase staff at the border with additional material. Some media outlets have talked about the use of helicopters and drones. When will the details of this plan be released? can you talk to us about about this extra staff that's going to be assigned to the border and clarify some of the comments that were made in Radio Canada articles about with respect to the safety patrols that are conducted at the border? Perhaps you could tell us whether the investments are going to enable us to purchase equipment and increase the staff on the ground. Thank you, Madam Chair. Initially, this billion-dollar figure is a surprise to us. We submitted our request, but I'm not sure that this is going to come to fruition. But as far as the investment angle is concerned, Minister Blanc was very clear. He is going to purchase drones, helicopters. Our position is that we are going to use technology so that we can take a different type of action, if you like, different measures. Instead of using the human as a detector, if you like, we're going to rely on modern technology that we can purchase quickly, and that will have an impact. This is what we're suggesting from the east to the west coast. Also, as for the number of people on the safety patrols, I don't know how many people are going to be involved in that, but there have been we're going to do a night surge where we're working hand in hand with the USBT when we do this type of work, and we do this on a daily basis as well too. So just in the past 2 days, we've intercepted 2 people who were trying to cross the border. So there's very good cooperation. But once again, when I go back to the question of equipment, we need to modernize our equipment. We have to really rely on technology. And speaking of this technology, I know that you're already working with some technology, but often it's a collaboration or cooperation between the human and the technology. For example, in the use of drone to detect certain vehicles that come in. They may be transporting immigrants or other people. I imagine you need evidence so that you can arrest the individuals involved. At least, perhaps you could tell me if this is the case when you're dealing with immigrants who arrive illegally. Perhaps they're going to try to do this quickly. So what's the relationship between technology and the human being? Do we have staff, for example, that use these helicopters or drones as a way of detecting people or families that are trying to cross the border illegally? Do we have rapid response teams that can go there to the border? I know. Do we need evidence? Do we need a special mandate? Or is it just doubt that's involved or suspicion that enables us to go ahead and use this technology? Do you have a way of arresting these people without necessarily, if you don't have anything clear evidence against them? With respect to the drones, this is used for areas where it's difficult to access. We're talking about ATVs that could be used. It also enables us to, our U.S. Counterparts, if they see something, to inform us about it. The offense occurs when they cross the border. The RCMP is authorized to arrest people on reasonable grounds. I forget how for an offense that has been committed, but that's based on info according to the officer who intercepts them. One final thing, with respect to technology, we want to have a combination of technology and human beings. We obviously, if we use technology, we want to have a human being who's going to be able to step in. Thank you very much.
With Mr. McGregor for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to all of you for joining our committee today. Commissioner, maybe I'll start with you. would you agree with me that like the growing use of synthetic drugs has presented a very real challenge to law enforcement in recent years?
I would say, Madam Chair, the growing use of synthetic drugs is a challenge, and I would remind, I see Mr. Motts and Mr. Shipley have a former background as police officer, and we've been fighting the war on crimes for the war on drugs for years, and many years, and I think we should start investing on the social aspect of deterring people using drugs.
But I want to focus on fentanyl in particular. Ballpark figure, for how many years now in Canada has fentanyl been identified as a drug of major concern, just because of its potency and how many overdose deaths it's been responsible for?
I wouldn't have. I'll have to ask Mathieu, see if I wouldn't have an exact date as to when
but
it
it's
came
been
on.
a while now.
It's been a while.
Yeah, and its potency has obviously been the issue of concern. Would you agree with me that both Canada and the United States are dealing with crises in our communities from coast to coast? Like this is a very real problem that both our countries are facing.
I would say I would agree, but I will expand that internationally. There's several countries that are dealing with the same problem.
Yeah. So, I think it's important for our committee to not just go back a couple of years, but we have to put this in the context that this has been a problem that our communities have been dealing with for quite some time. I'd like to turn to the CBSA, maybe to you, Mr. McCrory, because of your responsibility for intelligence. Do you have any way you can provide this committee, like with a comparison of, how many, like roughly speaking, the comparison of like the drugs that are entering the United States from the Canada side versus the drugs that are entering the United States from the Mexico side? I mean, looking at those two borders objectively, which one does the United States have to worry about the most?
I don't think we have an existing study, for example, that does that comparison in terms of and the U.S. would be the best source of information for that data.
In terms of like seizures, like what kind of seizure numbers do they have at the U.S.-Mexico border versus at the U.S.-Canada border?
I will say, in terms of fentanyl, Canada is not a significant source of fentanyl in the United States. The vast majority of the fentanyl that, as we understand it, in the United States is coming from Mexico.
That's good. I mean, that's a really important point to get across, and I think we have to remind Canadians of that the incoming president, I mean, I'll put this diplomatically, but sometimes fact checkers have a very tough job with him. It's evidence in every single one of his interviews. You can point to stuff which are factually not correct, and so I think the challenge for us is separating the rhetoric from the reality. Now, all of you have talked about the excellent relationship that you have with your U.S. counterparts. I believe that to be true. But, you've told us that we have this great working relationship, but if there is objectively areas for room for improvement, can maybe each one of your agencies tell us as policymakers in which area should we be looking to provide you with the resources to be able to do your job, like for improvement?
So from a border perspective, it's challenging in that drugs are moving around the world all the time. And one thing we're grappling with our B5 partners at the World Customs Organization are small packages. And as we've seen, a handful of fentanyl pills through the mail can become many doses out on the street and lives lost. And so we are working very closely with our partners and recently talking to courier companies who themselves don't want to be shippers of lethal drugs, also don't want a pile of new reporting rules put on them. And so we all recognize that the balance is supply chains and stopping drugs from coming in small packages. So that's an area we're focusing on and really getting at it through intelligence and targeting. So at any one time, risk-based, looking at what's coming in, looking at what's going out, but also grappling with the post-COVID significant increase in small parcels that are transiting the world at any one time.
Madam Chair, I would add I would add that I mentioned precursors, the regulations around precursors. I think there's something to be done there where we can examine from the import business as to what are the regulations for the precursors that are coming in and tighten it. We've seen on occasions where illegal precursors that we could not do anything with it would stay in a warehouse for a number of days before they would ship, so that would be a sign. But again, if they're legal, there's nothing much we can do. So is there any way that we can tighten the regulations and reverse the ownership on the person who's importing the material?
On precursors, quickly. I suppose, though, we can keep on running into the problem because now they're starting to import the precursors to the precursors, right? So, I mean, criminal organizations are always going to react to our latest tactics and evolve. So this is the challenge. You would agree, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. And now we'll start over again with the Conservatives with Mr. Lloyd. 5 minutes, please go ahead.
Thank you for all being here. My first question is we've long had an issue with contraband tobacco in this country. Wouldn't you agree? Like, is contraband tobacco a significant issue that CBSA and the RCMP deals with?
I would agree, still an issue. Yep.
Do you see an overlap between like organized crime in the tobacco trade, contraband tobacco trade, and the fentanyl trade? Is there a strong connection there, or is there no connection at all?
I'm not aware of any connection. But what I will say is when organized crime are involved, if there's a way to move commodities or a substance or anything, they will use the routes that are already pre-established.
So what you're saying is you don't have evidence before you today to say that the groups that are doing it are the same, but that they're using the same supply chain networks to move their product over the borders.
That's a possibility.
So would you say that if we were to aggressively crack down on contraband tobacco, that we would also see benefits in terms of breaking up the supply chain for fentanyl and other drugs, smuggled guns, for example, human smuggling across the border? Do you think there's a potential?
It could have an immediate impact, but as someone mentioned earlier, organized crime will adjust based on legislation and how we operate.
And of course, I know funding's always an issue. We're in tight economic times, and does the Canadian government and provincial governments lose a significant amount of money on contraband tobacco every year?
I wouldn't have the exact numbers, but one can assume that they're losing money.
And if we were to crack down on that, perhaps we could get the revenues and the funding needed so that we could crack down on the fentanyl trade and the drug trade. Do you have any evidence of what organized crime is using the revenues, the profits they get from contraband tobacco? What are those profits being reinvested into?
It's the way of life. It's how they make the money. They get richer by bringing contraband or illicit substances or firearms or human smuggling, and they just reinvest.
So the revenues from the contraband tobacco trade are also leading to the drug trade, the firearms trade, the human trafficking trade. There's a connection there.
Well, as I said, if you look at organized crime, they're involved where anywhere they can make money. Somebody.
Okay. So there is a strong connection. We just recently finished up with our long auto study, and we've heard time and time again that stolen vehicles from Canada that are being exported abroad through our ports are being used to finance terrorist organizations around the world. They're being used to finance the purchase of smuggled firearms into our country. This is a very serious issue. Clearly, our ports are the weak point here. Does the CBSA have any recommendations for things that we can adopt to strengthen our ports so that we can not only, protect Canadians from the drug trade, but also give our American and other trading allies and partners assurances that Canada's taking the necessary action to protect them?
So, from the CBSA perspective, we work extremely collaboratively with our port authorities, and you did mention stolen vehicles, and the Port of Montreal in particular, where we've seen the highest volume, has been an excellent partner and has been taking their own initiative on how they can further stop the contraband coming into their ports. The more containers we look at, the slower things go. So
they're coming through the Port of Vancouver, I would assume, given that seems logistically to make more sense. What are we doing to intercept those shipments coming into Canada? How can we strengthen our ports to block those?
So I don't want to speak on behalf of the ports. The work that we do in terms of inspecting and interdicting precursors and other contraband coming in through the ports is through a combination of intelligence, targeting information from allies, information that we have received through the many information sharing and collaborative arrangements we have with our policing partners.
Recommendations on how we can strengthen that today? Like, is there a plan? You know, we've just been, the president-elect of the United States says he's going to put a 25% tariff on us. So do we have a plan to show that we're taking action on this, or are we currently just working on the plan?
So I'll defer to the minister's remarks yesterday about the plan that was consulted with the provinces and that he has indicated, as has the Prime Minister, that they will talk to the Americans.
So there is a plan?
Your question on the ports, one issue with CBSA is ports are required to provide us space to do our examinations for imports. They're not required to provide us space for exports. That being said, we haven't run into ports that are resistant to providing us that space, but that's an area where there's a bit of a legislative gap that we would be interested in considering.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. O'Gorman. And we will go to Liberals. Ms. Vandenbeld for 5 minutes.
I'd just like to follow up, Mr. McCrory, on something that you said in your previous answer, where you said Canada is not a significant source of fentanyl into the U.S. And I actually have some numbers here that show that the amount of fentanyl that's been seized by U.S. authorities at the Canadian border is only 0.2% of the fentanyl entering the United States. And I also have a figure here that says that the number of illegal crossings of people going into the United States from Canada is only 0.6% of the total entering the United States. So I wonder if you could confirm whether those numbers are accurate. And also my understanding is that the crossings of people from north to south are actually decreasing, if you could confirm that as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the source of that data is, so it's hard for me to confirm or not. I would say that we did see a significant increase in the number of southbound movements over the last year. They peaked in June, probably around 7,000, and this is based on data that we've got from USCBP. It's peaked in June. It's now down. I think November was around 400 or 500.
And those numbers, though, 0.2%, 0.6%, this doesn't sound completely out of the ballpark for you.
It doesn't sound, no.
So it would be somewhere around that amount. It's a very small amount. Now, how does this compare, and perhaps President O'Gorman, how does this compare to what's coming the other way in terms of people, firearms, fentanyl, the amount that's going into the United States versus the amount that you're able to get at the border?
So if you're asking about people coming up and crossing illegally northbound, I would defer to my colleague who would be, so we process people who duly show up at the,
This is true.
at the port of entry, so I'll pass that over to my
Commissioner?
colleague.
Yeah, so, for the northbound, what we've seen over the years, if I go back in 2022, we had finished about with 40,000 people. That was, mind you, that was before the STCA. It dipped in 2023 down to 15,000, and that's as a result of the STCA. And now this year to date, we have 1,100 people on record that have come up northbound.
Okay, and okay.
The southbound, if you're referring to the southbound, we don't track the southbound. We're starting to track the southbound, but we report it to USBB, and then whatever they do with it, we're not always aware or made informed of what they do with it, so it's difficult for us to have an exact number for southbound.
And while I have you, Commissioner, in Budget 2023, we provided funding for renewed Canadian drugs and substance strategy. So if you could talk a little bit about the additional resources that the RCMP may have received for that and how you've deployed those resources.
Yeah, this predominantly injected in our intel and investigators. I don't have that exact number, but I'd be more than happy to circle back with a breakdown.
Yes, please. Yes, please do that. And President O'Gorman, just looking at some of the changes that we've made, I understand that in 2017, we allowed the CBSA officers to look at mail that is 30 grams or less, because previously they weren't able to do that. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of that?
Sure. So CBSA did need a warrant, actually, to look at parcels that were under 30 grams. And as I mentioned earlier, that we were seeing pills coming through the postal and courier service. So that allowed us to be able to open them. And again, that for certain people, that's personal use, but for other people, that's mixing with other things and creating significantly higher numbers of doses that would go out onto the street. So it was very helpful.
And how many lives would you say that has saved?
I wouldn't be able to speculate.
Okay. Okay. How much time do I have, Madam Chair?
46 seconds.
46 seconds. So just very quickly, Commissioner, we talked a lot about the work that you're doing with the American authorities. If you could just very quickly talk about how successful that cooperation is.
Well, we have an excellent cooperation with Aaron's team, CBSA, as well as USBP. We've been at it for several years with it, and I mean several years. We've been through COVID, where the relationships are excellent. There's joint operations that are run with USBP. Myself and Aaron are planning to go to visit Washington, the newly appointed people, so that we can introduce ourselves and how to see if we can better work together. So there's a lot of good work going on across the country with our USBP, and there's several forums, international forums, that we participate as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Michaud, for 5 minutes. Oh, pardon me, 2 minutes. 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have the same figures as those put forward by Ms. Vanderbilt. There was in a news clip for the L'Enquête of this 40,000 CELIs that were intercepted at the U.S. border over the past 2 years. Only very few pounds came from Canada. Most of it came from Mexico. I think it's 0.1 or 2% that goes from Canada to the U.S. and according to an article from the National Drug Threat Assessment that submits a report on drug trafficking, says that. So I understand. Perhaps you could confirm these figures. I didn't follow if Mr. Trump has made a specific statement with respect to Mexico, but it reminds me of the declarations that he made the first time that he came into office, when he talked about the southern border with Mexico. And all of a sudden, he seems to be aiming at Canada. And he even said that we could become the 51st state of the U.S. So I'd like to ask you, why do you think Mr. Trump is really going after Canada? I know that's a difficult question to answer because it's hard to know what he is thinking of when he says these things. But my question is, when you see a situation occur like that with its biggest ally, how do you deal with this at the CBSA? What can we do to prevent this type of unforeseeable conduct on the part of the U.S. administration? As I said, I don't want to repeat myself, but we work very closely with the U.S. agencies, whether it be the ATF or the U.S. BP, or our success. I don't know if everyone's aware of the success that we've had. Pardon me, I'm just going to say this in English.
Every day we are sharing information. Every intelligence report we create, we send to the U.S., our counterparts, as a matter of course. We find a new way that drugs are hidden and we share it with them. So operationally, I'm not concerned that there's a view of our agencies that we're not doing enough. Et sur la question de qu'est-ce qui est dans la tête des...
And as for what's in the heads of people, and I really don't know. As the government indicated, we can always do more. And these are issues that are being reviewed at the moment. And the minister said publicly that there's going to be more investment made so that we can do even more than what we're doing right now.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Mr. McGregor for 2.5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Maybe to the CBSA. I'm focusing on northbound trafficking, so originating from the United States, coming into Canada, contraband. Based on the data that you have available at your agency from seizures made at ports, or in collaboration with the RCMP if it's seized further inland, can you just list off what are the imports of greatest concern from the United States coming into Canada?
So the first 3 quarters of this year, CBSA seized 750 firearms.
Mm-hmm.
So we do see a lot of weapons and firearms coming northbound.
Mm-hmm.
Currency, we see people bringing currency more than 10,000, and again, without an explanation, leads us to suspect ill-gotten gains and from travelers. We see cocaine coming up, but again, there was a major seizure of cocaine made by CBSA based on intelligence from the U.S. that was transiting from California to Europe. And so, just to my earlier comment, drugs are going all over all the time, and tobacco, 500,000 kilograms of tobacco seized, and the point was made about the revenue and the links to organized crime. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add, but
yeah, no, thank you for that. And then maybe I'll turn to you, Commissioner. Just like with fentanyl, how has the RCMP seen the fentanyl trade evolve over the last decade? Like, at the beginning, was it more like fentanyl was coming in, and have we now evolved to a situation where the precursors are coming in and there's more manufacturing happening within the Canadian border? Is that how the evolution has happened, roughly?
I would say there are, Madam Chair, there's more organized crime that are involved with fentanyl because it's so lucrative. It's very cheap to make, and it's the return on investment is very high, which is concerning.
Thank you very much, and we will now Mr. Motz for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being here, and thank you to both of your organization's frontline members who are boots on the ground to stand in the gap at our borders and across this country. So thank you for that. We know that through an order paper question that was submitted, that the Liberals lost track of 30,000 individuals scheduled for deportation, which is troubling in itself. How can something like this possibly occur? Specifically, 29,730 some who are on wanted, warrants for by immigration authorities, and they fail to appear. So how does this happen?
So on removals, indeed, you're right. The removals inventory that we have right now is significant. It's not static. So I will start by saying that. And last year we removed over 16,000 people, the most in a decade, and we're on track to do the same this year. Our officers are very focused on removals. So when somebody has gone through the immigration process and they are not granted status, sometimes they've been here for years. And so it will be time for them to be removed, but it will take a bit of time. The school year will finish and so on. And so just to say that our expectation is that people leave when they are not granted status, and indeed many do.
But keep in mind, ma'am, that in the next 2 years, 2.4 million visas are due to expire. So how do we as a country expect to have the people that should be leaving under those orders be leaving when we can't keep track of the ones we've got now at only 30,000?
Yes. So there's the people that will leave voluntarily. There's the people that CBSA needs to help leave, and I say that not euphemistically, buy their ticket, perhaps put them in an immigration detention center because we are concerned they will abscond. And then those that our investigators and errand staff are looking for all the time. And so to say that we are putting in a big effort, as we did this year, to increase by 59%. But as you say,
there's more to do. There's a lot more to do.
There's always more.
So let me move on to we've seen in the media and know that the Americans have seen a huge increase in the number of people coming from Canada into the United States illegally. Between 2002 and 2022 and 2024, it's estimated that that increase was 82% to roughly around 19,000 people in that 2 year. And in fact, about a 680% increase from 2015 when this government took effect to now, Canadians, illegally crossing the border into the United States. Why? How would you recommend we reverse this or mitigate this trend?
So some of it was mitigated with the imposition of a partial visa on Mexico and recent decisions by IRCC and the minister to tighten visa requirements and to end a process that was providing a temporary public policy for temporary resident visas. So those have all had a material impact from what CBSA has seen,
Right.
and we continue abroad.
Okay, so I want to continue on with the Canadians or people from Canada illegally entering the United States, but of greater concern than that, and that is concerning in itself. There's nearly 1,200 people on various terror watch lists who have been stopped by U.S. authorities entering the United States from Canada, and by contrast, the same people on terror watch lists entering the United States from Mexico in that same time period of 3 years was, right around 200. So, it's concerning. Like, so why are U.S. Border Patrols able to, interdict these individuals, and we seem to have a problem? And I'm going to get to the question of how do these people get in Canada in the first place in a minute.
So I'll begin by saying the way in which the U.S. reports on their data is a subject of discussion. So a certain number of those people, when they say interdicted or encountered, are people going through a port of entry and turned back to Canada. And that happens going the other way all the time. So that's the system working. And, what they say they're on a terrorist watch list, so I don't have information in those specific databases. But I think it's important to understand.
But you have the access to those databases, do you not?
We do.
Yes.
And these are people that the Americans turn around.
Right. And so then my next question would be, we have.
So sorry, the time is up.
Oh, I'll have to use the next round.
Yes,
Stay
thank you.
tuned.
We'll go to Ms. Zahid for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to the witnesses for appearing before the committee. My first question is for Commissioner. When we think of securing our border, my mind instinctively goes to the good work done by the CBSA. However, between ports of entry, it is the RCMP jurisdiction. So what work is the RCMP doing to survey our borders between the different ports of entries?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. The RCMP relies on different manners of ensuring the protection between the ports of entry. I think we have boats that are on the Great Lake. We have a program called Shiprider that's on the Great Lakes. We have the Maritime Security Operations Centers, that coordination piece that happens on the East Coast and the West Coast. And between the technology that we have and the human patrols that we have is how we ensure the security of the borders.
The RCMP are not the only eyes on the land border with the U.S. What should we understand as parliamentarians about the cooperation between agencies, whether federal, provincial, territorial, or indigenous, when it comes to border security and border-related law enforcement?
I think it's fair to say, Madam Chair, that we all, as Canadians, we all want the same thing, is have a secure border. So if provincial premiers are providing additional resources to assist, I would say that we ensure that there's a coordination, we work together, and we ensure that the borders are safe, because ultimately that's the end objective for Canadians.
So similarly, regarding cooperation with the authorities in various jurisdictions on the American side, How long have such relationships existed? And can you please point to some specific instances of successful interagency cooperation?
As for, Madam Chair, as for the length, I'm not aware, but it goes back several years. But what I can tell, stories of success, I think I shared this with the committee last time I was here. We had a case in Manitoba where our colleagues USBP had spotted 6 individuals, I believe, that were crossing northbound in a cold night, and we were informed, dispatched our team there, went to I would say to save the people because most of them were transported to the hospital, and I believe to this day there's still one who's in the hospital with severe frostbite. So that's a good cooperation, a good example of how we collaborate with USBP. But this is, I'll go back to what Aaron said earlier, this is done on a daily basis. We have our integrated border enforcement teams that work collaboratively, and that's what the IBET, better known as IBET, is. You have people from different agencies, different law enforcement that come together and share intelligence and sometimes plan operations. So this is strong because nobody can do it alone. It's bringing people together to ensure that the borders are safe.
Thank you, Commissioner. What measures does the RCMP currently have in place to prevent the unauthorized or the irregular crossings of people at the Canada-US borders?
Excuse me, I didn't hear the first word. What
measures does the RCMP currently have in place?
Measures. The measures is we have data that comes in on a daily basis, Matt, right? Yes. Daily basis, and at the end of the week we have a chart of who crosses, how many apprehensions, how many gone on arrivals, the ethnicity of the people that are crossing as well, the borders, and that's spread out on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis as well. And I know we also look at the CBSA's data that they get, I think, on a daily basis. I don't want to speak on behalf of Aaron, but I think they collect on a daily basis.
And how do you think the Safe Third Country Agreement supports the RCMP efforts in preventing irregular border crossings?
Well, based on our observations, based on our interceptions, and I've shared earlier, to date we have 1,100 people that crossed northbound, and all apprehended, right, Matt? Correct. All apprehended, and then the Safe Third Country Agreement kicks in which we hand them over to CBSA, and then they do their work. So, yeah, it has an impact for sure.
Okay. Commissioner, you mentioned that...
I'm so sorry, Ms. Zahid, but we're just out of time. We'll come back to you. Thank you so much. Actually, I just might use my prerogative, Chair, just to follow up on something you said just briefly on the ship rider program. That's a dual American-Canadian. They ride the boat together, and when we cross into Canadian territory, the Canadian takes over, and in American territory, the American takes over. Is that correct?
I brought Matt for a reason, so I'll let him to expand on that.
Thank you, Commissioner. You're correct. It's a truly binational operating program. The members train together. The training is given in South Carolina, and you're right. The premise is that if there's interdiction that's required on the Canadian side, the Canadian law enforcement officials will utilize their authorities, and when the ship crosses over into the U.S. side, there's a respect of sovereignty, and the U.S. law enforcement will use their powers.
Just a brief follow-up. There was you were looking at a dirt rider, like on land comparison, but that never did really come to fruition. Is that correct?
It's land rider, Madam Chair, is the term. I believe it's still being discussed between the two countries.
Thank you.
I would say, Madam Chair, air as well.
Oh, air rider.
We're looking at something.
Thank you very much. That's good to know. Thank you, Mr. Motz. We're going to go to Mr. Shipley for 5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to return back to the Commissioner and ask some questions about fentanyl right now. Obviously, we're seeing, everybody has to agree that across Canada, fentanyl is a very serious situation, harming many, many people, affecting families. It's right across the country. Obviously, it's across the world, but we're here today to talk about Canada. Recently, the Canadian Department of Foreign Affairs has been quoted as saying that Canada is now a net exporter of fentanyl. I understand there's been some talk today about how much goes to the States, how much goes here, but overall, Commissioner, would you agree with the statement from the Department of Foreign Affairs that Canada right now is a net exporter of fentanyl?
So Canada is producing quantities such that it would be impossible for Canadian consumers to consume. There is an export. We are considered exporting some fentanyl. As was mentioned earlier, minute trace goes to the United States based on the intelligence that we have. But it is being exported at a greater cost than what the cartel is actually making it right now.
Thank you. And recently there was 11 kilograms of fentanyl originating from Canada was recently seized at the Australian border. I assume, I'm not obviously an expert in the size of that, but I assume 11 kilograms is a lot of fentanyl. Is that a lot? It is a lot, and during my Five Eyes meetings, I do chat with my counterpart from Australia to see how we can work together. Not that we don't work together, but work a stronger partnership in addressing fentanyl. Okay, so that's just one example. Obviously, we're exporting it here now from this country. Commissioner, could you also confirm that there are at least 350 organized crime groups operating in the domestic fentanyl market, and that these groups are importing precursor chemicals into Canada, mostly from China, for the illegal production of fentanyl?
I don't have the exact number of organized crime groups operating or importing precursors, but I could commit to look in our holdings and come back to you.
Yeah, the Chief Superintendent's nodding a little bit. I know you're...
I don't have the exact number. I was agreeing with the Commissioner, but we could get that figure from Criminal Intelligence Service Canada. We have that data in our holdings, yes.
Which would be great. And I think that's really good to have, because here at Public Safety, we're always talking about many of the issues, and some of those are about auto theft, which I know my colleague from Ms. Michaud has mentioned many times, and a lot of that can be being fueled from this too. So that's why that'd be good information to get if we could. So I would just like to talk about the United States. They've taken significant steps against the People's Republic of China to stop the illegal flow of fentanyl and its precursors into their country. They have sanctioned dozens of individuals and companies profiting from the illegal fentanyl trade, and both the U.S. and Mexico have bilateral working groups with China to consult on counter narcotics and precursors. As of October 2024, Canada has not made a request for a formal working group with China. Given that 82% of overdose deaths in 2023 involve fentanyl, and that China is the main source country for illegal fentanyl precursor imports into Canada, should we not be willing to take similar steps as our North American allies? Do you not think that would help curb some of the situations going on here?
I would say, Madam Chair, either we take similar steps or we join our American colleagues and Mexican together, so a stronger force to address it.
Thank you for that. Ms. O'Gorman, since 2019, Beijing banned the production and sale of fentanyl. How many kilograms of precursor chemicals were seized by our border officers?
So, unfortunately, the way we classify precursors and other drugs, they're all kind of lumped together. I will ask Mr. McCrory, we have some data, and it's not exclusively precursors. It's a small amount of precursors and other drugs mixed in there.
Yes, thanks, Madam President. In terms of how we track the data, unfortunately, we can't break out the precursors from other drugs. And so the first 3 quarters of this year, we've seized over 21,000 kilograms of other drugs, narcotics, and precursor chemicals.
Sure. 20 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. O'Connell for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. I want to follow up actually on Mr. Shipley's questions in terms of the exporting of fentanyl as an example, because part of that, in fact, confirms that it's not just a question of borders, it's production. And it's my understanding that through investments in the RCMP, there have been 40 drug labs shut down since 2018. And without going into any operational kind of, tactics that would help organized crime. But can we talk about, I would think that very large clandestine drug labs would require intelligence sharing, would require sophisticated RCMP investigations, and that type of work is something that requires resources to be able to do. So could you speak to a little bit about the investments to be able to do that work? Because if you shut down any labs at the production level, then the export of that becomes less of an issue on the borders.
So thank you. And if you've read in the CTV in BC recently that we have seized drums.
Sorry, there wasn't a mic on for you.
Okay. If you read into the CTV article, this happened middle of the week, last week, or beginning of the week, where the RCMP seized several barrels of chemicals based on information that was provided by our U.S. colleagues. So to your question, it is where we're going to is one. There's a couple approach here from the Canadian perspective. Our CIROC, which is a Canadian Integrated Response to Organized Crime, is putting a final touch on a fentanyl strategy. And CIROC, what CIROC is you have key leaders, police leaders from across the country to come together to discuss about ongoing problems and to tackle it together. So that's one thing. And what we are looking at is shifting where we have dedicated teams that are strictly targeting fentanyl. Because when you have a drug team that looking at different commodities, but considering what we're seeing is with the additional funding that we're hoping to get and resources really target specific things when it comes to, and not only us, but we do have a call with the president of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police to make sure that all law enforcement are gathered together, are informed what's going on the border, but also how to tackle fentanyl.
And when did that specific kind of task force or group looking specifically at fentanyl kind of come together?
Well, we've had some, and I'll turn to Matt, see if he has any, but we've had some groups that have been working on the different international committees that we've been working at. And from there, drums intelligence, and then sometimes we're successful in some of the operations. Matt?
At CIROC specifically, thank you for your question. The fentanyl has been a priority for the last 3 years. The fentanyl strategy has been implemented since last year. But as the commissioner is saying, there's multiple areas where we work on fentanyl. And to your question about resources, and to the commissioner's point of the super lab in BC, the cleanup costs alone of the chemicals at this point right now, we're already at $500,000. So that money cannot go to other operations unless there's additional resources put in.
Thank you. So I don't mean to cut you off. We're just limited of time. But that then kind of makes the suggestion that there's been a surge of activity just since President-elect Trump has come forward. That specific fentanyl kind of group has been working for at least the last 3 years and then ramping up. And obviously that adjustment has to be made. I also understand that in 2023, Canada listed fentanyl precursor chemicals under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. Do you happen to know what the maximum sentence is for that a person can face if they are found guilty of trafficking precursors?
I do not have that information.
Okay.
I would say that it would be depending on the judge who's presiding.
Fair enough, but we can maybe follow up with justice. It's my understanding it's actually a life sentence, but we can certainly follow up with justice in terms of that. In terms of some of the precursor, Commissioner, you mentioned about the reverse onus. Are there other countries with that? Because that would also then help if we have pretty strong sentences regarding the trafficking of precursors. And if there are additional legislative proposals that would have a reverse onus, then those would be pretty strict penalties together. Do you have examples of how that reverse onus kind of approach looks like, what that looks like, and if there are other countries currently doing something similar?
Just a brief response. We're over time.
You would have to look at the process when the precursors are imported into Canada, and then look at how they collected by the person who imported them, and see what we could do to tighten up and reverse the onus on the person as to why do you need these drums. Background checks. Some of the background checks are already done on the companies, but I think there's something to be done where we can tighten that up.
Thank you very much. Ms. Michaud for 2.5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We talk a lot about the government plan to deal with this 25% tariff threat, but this is a plan that goes both ways. And during the last election campaign, pledges were made. He said that this was an emergency plan and that he was going to use the American Army to expel people who enter U.S. Illegally. He also said in a press release that he would talk about that this is going to be the biggest deportation that's ever taken place on American soil. More than 60,000 people had asked for asylum in Canada. Today, in the United States, there are about 11,000 people who have no status whatsoever, and there are hundreds of thousands who are going to have their visas expire in the months that lie ahead. He talked to do away with the policy on undocumented aliens. He talked about immigrations coming from other countries to force other countries to repatriate people who have been expelled, and that he would replace the system with another new system. And there are other elements that I won't go into all of that, but I do have the impression that we're going to see a huge number of people who are going to try to enter Canada, and we know that a plan is going to be released next week, but I would imagine that you're going to have to consult various organizations to find out what could you be recommending. And often I don't want to give you the impression we think that nothing's been done up until now about this, but I would imagine that with these types of situations, other additional measures can be taken. You're going to be given this additional $1 billion. Could you, Ms. O'Gorman, can you talk about recommendations that you made to the minister?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We consulted.
Precise advice, but certainly additional resources in all of our business lines would yield increased outcomes. Alors, c'est pas mal évident, mais plus de personnes pour...
That's obvious. More people can to look at imports, exports. People talked about the technology that we could use to intercept people or detect people. We can do more, and certainly the minister did consult us about these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to ask on that particular subject point. You know, when the incoming president, Mr. Trump, he's referred to using the U.S. military to enforce measures regarding the deportation of people who have entered the U.S. irregularly. I guess in practical terms, like, what are the consequences for Canada if he follows through? Like, do you have some projections on what that would actually mean? Would our immigration detention centers be up to the task? I just want to know, like, if he is actually going to follow through, what does that mean for Canada? Like, how many people do you perceive might actually come our way? Because the United States says they are not our problem anymore and they need to leave.
So the safe third country is in place, and as my colleague said, we implement it every day. And so every day people come to the ports of entry to seek asylum. We process them, and if they qualify for one of the few exemptions, then they come into the country, into the asylum system. So we are prepared for a surge, but recognize the safe third.
May I ask, do you have a figure attached to that surge? Like, roughly speak, do you know how many that would result in? coming
No,
back
because
to
it
Canada?
would mean knowing, one, the number of people who would want to come to Canada, two, those who would qualify for an exception. And so that's just a bit unknowable. The exceptions include a family member, if you're a minor, if you're a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, and like are the detention centers, the 3 that we have, are they up to the task? I mean, like, are you going to have to rely on provincial prisons for people that you believe are a flight risk? We just want to know.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot your
These are
question.
human beings. We want to make sure that they are going to be treated with dignity, respect, and have all the resources afforded to them.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so just in every day, a very small number of people who seek asylum in Canada are subject to detention.
Okay.
13,000 who are subject to detention are subject to alternatives to detention, which is to say bracelets, reporting. So the small number who are detained based on a decision by the Immigration and Refugee Board are held in our IHCs. We regret having lost access to provincial detention facilities so quickly before we could build the infrastructure, but we are retrofitting our infrastructure to be able to take on that task. So
Thank you
I
very
don't
much.
expect the level of detention would necessarily change from what it is today.
Thank you, Ms. O'Gorman. Mr. Lloyd for 5 minutes.
Thank you. How many, to the RCMP, how many people do you estimate are involved in the production and distribution of fentanyl in Canada? Do you have like a ballpark estimate? Is it 1,000 people? Is it 10,000 people?
I don't have a ballpark figure on it.
So you have no idea how many people could possibly be involved in the fentanyl trade in Canada?
There's a significant group, significant number of organized crime group, but if you're asking me for a specific number, I can't give you a specific number.
How many organized crime groups are involved?
Over 4,000 organized crime groups in Canada, as assessed by the Criminal Intelligence Service Canada.
4,000 individual organized crime groups, all with their own distinct leadership and membership?
That's correct.
That's stunning. Now, we heard during the auto theft study from Ontario Provincial Police that oftentimes when they're catching people in the act of stealing cars or as a result of their investigations, that it's often people that they've already been interacting with, people that they've caught previously. In fact, many of these people were out on bail. Are you finding in your fentanyl investigations, when you're cracking down on these labs and you're having these great busts that we like to see, and you're catching people, are these people that are known to law enforcement generally, or are they people that have had no interaction with law enforcement before?
Go ahead.
I'm happy to take it. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for the question. Yes, it's fair to say that organized crime individuals are not individuals that have been arrested only once. We deal with the same individuals and groups very often.
So you would say that in the majority of cases that the people that you're catching in these things are repeat offenders?
That's fair to say, yeah.
Now, in a previous parliament under this Liberal government, Bill C-5 reduced a number of mandatory minimum penalties, and some of these mandatory minimum penalties were related to drug trafficking and the import and export of drugs. And these Schedule I drugs include fentanyl. So we're seeing, as a result of legislation like this, that people who are involved in this deadly fentanyl trade are getting back out on the streets more quickly, and obviously you guys are catching them again in the act. It's clear that mandatory minimum penalties, by keeping these drug pushers in prison for longer, hopefully acts as a deterrent for them continuing that activity, but at least it takes them off the street. How quickly do you find like the time period between these criminals getting out on bail or getting out on the street that you're catching them? Is it like years, like 10 years later that they're getting caught, or are you finding it's more frequent?
So it'd be speculative on my part as to say when they get back in. They're released, most of the times they're released under strict conditions. Some obey the conditions, some don't obey the conditions. And to put a specific timeline as to when they get back involved in organized crime is hard to put a quantified number.
But it wouldn't be a huge amount of time. We could be talking in some cases days, some cases months, maybe in some cases years, but certainly there's a wide spectrum of cases.
I would agree that there's a wide spectrum, as you covered, from days to years to several years.
Anyways, yeah, because I agree. We could shut down all the labs we want, but if we're not shutting down the people that are setting up the labs, then we're not going to be very effective at. We need to shut down the people that are involved. What can we do to get these people behind bars so that they're not out there pushing these drugs that are killing members of our communities? What can we do better?
So I would answer. I think there's multiple avenues here. One is how do we stop the precursors or slow the precursors from coming in the country? I do think that we need a strong outreach program to inform the Canadian public of the harm of fentanyl. And the other one is sharing information that is ongoing with law enforcement.
It's killed. I don't want to correct you because I agree with you, but it has killed more people in Canada than died in the Second World War, than Canadians that died in the Second World War, this fentanyl opioid overdose crisis. So I think many Canadians know that this is a deadly epidemic that has killed people in my family. It's killed people in many families across Canada. It's devastating, and I hope that you will get the resources and get the legal backing to be able to continue doing your work and cracking down on these people, because we cannot allow this to continue. As we've seen with this study, it's now costing us our international reputation, and so I support you in the work you're doing, and I only hope that you get all the tools that you need to get that job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. And I'll just follow up because I don't believe you answered this question, Commissioner, so just using my chair's prerogative. Would stiffer penalties for drug traffickers and importers be an effective tool to combat this issue?
I would say it's one tool to combat the issue, stiffer penalties for sure.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mr. Sheehan, for 5 minutes, please.
I won't touch that button again. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this important study that you've undertaken. I represent Sault Ste. Marie, the riding thereof, a border town. I'm also a steel town as well. And so, studying Trump's tariff threat because of the border, I don't accept that premise that we're a problem, as I didn't accept that we're a problem with the 232 tariffs. Like, I open up my windows when I wake up in the morning, I can see the United States, and there wasn't any gun turrets or barbed wire or protected. But fast forward to today, when I take a look at the investments that we have done at our border, just in Sault Ste. Marie, because we cross every day. I went to school in Michigan, Lake Superior State University. I crossed every single day, and I saw how well the border functioned, and the sharing of information between America and the United States. When I go to the United States, they know what I potentially have done, which I've done nothing, but that kind of sharing of information. And, I remember one time when I was at Lake State, I had a Chevy Chevette full of my American friends. We pulled up to our border crossing, and we were waiting in line, and one of the Americans said, "Oh, man, wouldn't it be great if we're all just one big country?" And I quickly said back to him, he said, "Sure, it'd be great having one prime minister." And then the ensuing discussion started. But that border crossing then has totally changed. I recently cut the ribbon on a $51 million investment at the Sioux border, which made the facility larger, bigger inspection rooms, more lanes, areas for the staff to work in. My question through you, Chair, to our fine friends here is, that's one example, but could you please share with the examples of some of the investments in facilities? But that's not, and I've also toured afterwards and saw the new equipment being put in there, the X-ray machines, the stuff that identify the drugs, that the officers can identify right away, and as well as the training that takes place. So if you wouldn't mind just putting on record the investments that we've actually done to continue to work closely with our Americans and protect our borders.
Sure. So CBSA is in the process of a $480 million infrastructure improvement across our land ports of entry. And so we have finished several of them, Fraser, Bloomfield, St. Orly. You mentioned already the new equipment in Sault Ste. Marie. And we're in the process of getting ready to do St. Bernard de la Colle and early work around Pacific Highway. We are looking and talking to the Americans about a joint facility in Beaver Creek and looking to see what that would look like. And then we also have additional detection equipment across the country, quite a long list, small and large detector dog teams. But the infrastructure projects that have been done, we've been aligning them with the Americans, hoping to not kind of build vastly different scales, and then would have to take the opportunity to point out the Gordie Howe Bridge and getting ready for that to open and finishing touches on there as well.
And what kind of training, that you could highlight for the committee that, our officers undertake? Again, the place I went to university, they educated a lot of police officers, both in the United States and Canada. A lot of border officers, either Canadian or American, went to school together. What kind of continuous improvement and training? Because, we have the infrastructure, the facilities, we have the equipment, but we also rely on officers to do what they do to identify, and they do quite a good job.
Absolutely. So an excellent introductory training program that spans several months at our campus in Rigaud, and then training throughout, but continually sharing intelligence and information. So what an officer will uncover in a secret compartment that you need to kind of press 4 buttons before it will open will be shared with officers across the country to look out for the same thing. So a lot of the training they do is just unrelentingly looking at different ways people are trying to conceal contraband as they cross the border.
And you mentioned about the sniffer dogs. That's like old tech, if you will. They've been around for a while, but they still play a very important role. I know we have one at the border in the Sioux as well. What's that program doing? Are you looking at, and not just, I'll talk about the old tech and the new tech. What are the plans for the future about investing in the border? I know that the minister is looking at announcing something, but are you able to share anything with the committee right now?
Not in terms of the announcement this week. I will say, just off of your comment, I think detector dogs are old technology, but they will have a place for the foreseeable future. I mean, barring any kind of new technology that we haven't thought of, but just in terms of the places they can get into and how quickly they can do their jobs. So I don't foresee us, like I said, not needing our detector dogs. But certainly we're always looking at new equipment. Both.
Sorry, Ms. O'Gorman, I'm so sorry to cut you off. I apologize for just a bit over time. Thank you, Mr. Shahan. We'll go to Mr. Motz for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to change gears from my last and if I quiet line of questioning. If I got time, I'll come back to it. Recently, the Minister of Public Safety was here and indicated to this committee that he's working on a plan to strengthen our borders. And Commissioner, you had indicated as well that it was, reported in the National Post that you had presented the government with a plan to bolster the country's border security. Can you kind of describe what that plan looks like from the RCMP perspective? And I also want to ask Ms. O'Gorman, for both of you, what developments have been made since the minister's meeting with us here a couple weeks ago on the plan, and what is it looking like, and how is it rolling out, and what does it look like moving forward?
So for us, what we've briefed the minister on is really to increase our capabilities when it comes to technology, evergreening technology that we have, increasing our resources, and this has already been said by the minister publicly, and having more ability when it comes to surveillance by means of drones or helicopters. There is an appetite also to, as what I said, when increase the resources, we have to be mindful that like any other organization, we have limited resources, but how can we benefit from maybe other organizations by working together and having additional people at the borders?
Actually, that would be almost the same answer I would give, insofar as that we are working extremely closely on a day-to-day basis with the RCMP as we carry out our mandate at ports of entry, and the RCMP does it in between. And so the extent to which they benefit from technology, we know what new technology is out there and how that would help us increase the amount of seizures that we're able to
Okay, fair enough. So if I'm hearing you correctly, there's not necessarily a specific plan other than we're going to capitalize on some evergreen technology that we already have. We're going to maybe put some more boots in the ground there. We're going to use some other technologies like drones or those sort of activities along the border. Is there a plan to develop bilateral agreements with the United States and partner in some of those border processes. I mean, I'm not seeing, the minister says we've got a plan, or we're going to develop a plan, and yet, we're bolstering a plan we already have, or we're doing something even bolder than we're doing now.
Well, I was just going to say, I would leave it to the minister to announce his plan, and as he said, he's consulted the provinces. But just I have to respond to your comment about agreements with the U.S. just because I don't want it to be understood that we don't have them.
Right.
We have them, information sharing, and we're increasing them and operationalizing them. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear that we do absolutely have agreements, multiple agreements with Customs and Border Protection, with the DEA, with the ATF, with HSI, sorry for the acronyms, but I suspect you know
Right,
what they are.
yeah.
So those agreements are well in place.
So, I mean, as part of the plan, and I don't know whether the minister has, apparently he's had conversations with provinces. Was part of the plan to include or have provinces step up, like Alberta made the announcement this afternoon, putting resources, manpower, technology, and other things on the border, spending $30 million to augment the resources there along in Alberta. Other provinces, I understand, are looking at doing also similar things along the border. Is that part of the plan that the government is talking about? Can any of you speak to that?
I can't speak about the conversation that the minister has had with his counterparts in different provinces. What I can say is that public safety at the deputy minister's level has a weekly call. Aaron and I are on the call with deputy ministers from across the country. And throughout the calls, there's a strong appetite to see how they can help. And the Premier of Alberta announcing that they are looking at mobilizing 51 officers. We welcome that. Obviously, as I said earlier in the committee, this is a shared responsibility. And we all want what's best for Canadians and ensure that there's a safe and secure border. So go ahead.
So sorry, Commissioner, that's great, and I applaud the Premier of Alberta for moving that direction. Now, how do you plan with CBSA and the RCMP, who also patrol and are part of the border security there on a very vast border, I might say, because I have all the border crossings there that matter in Alberta. How do you intend to incorporate so that you're not working against each other? So you share intel, you communicate together, you are on operations together. How do you plan on doing that?
Just a very brief answer, please.
Oh, sorry.
No different how we're doing it right now in the province of Quebec, where we're joined to the hip with Les Sautés Quebec, and we're collaborating together and we share the information. You might have joint teams, joint command teams to make sure that everybody knows what each other's doing, and at the intelligence sharing at the fast pace in real time.
I would encourage you guys to make sure that happens in all the provinces.
Thank you, Mr. Motz.
Sorry.
Thank you. Ms. O'Connell for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I can't help but laugh at Mr. Lloyd's last comments in his round when he said, quote, "I hope you get all the resources you need to do this work." And when he actually had the opportunity to vote on some of these resources, he actually voted against it. And following up on some questions about organized crime, it actually brings me back. I come from a region where the Hells Angels has been, active at different points of time. They don't really go away, but there are spikes in terms of activity. In fact, when I was in high school, I did a placement with our local police in forensics, and organized crime was a big focus of some of that work. So did organized crime groups just spike after the Supreme Court shut down mandatory minimums?
I would say the activities of the organized crime groups, when you see this, I wouldn't say spike, they're constant. They're forever engaged in criminal activity, even though if you break one cell down, there's another cell that replaces it, and it continues.
And as part of their operations, it's really what the market demands. It's almost an organized crime capitalism, that if there is a large profit opportunity in, let's say today it's fentanyl, and in 5 years from now it's some different drug, that they change operations, that it's not that the organizations themselves don't continue to operate, but perhaps maybe the drug of choice or the guns of choice or the trafficking of choice might change depending on where there's an actual market?
As I said earlier on, organized crime are driven by financial gains. And what you see profit-wise, or if they change from one commodity to another, geography also plays a key role, where this is why you see sometimes turf wars with different organized crime group, because they're expanding territory, whatnot. But whatever is the commodity of the day and the demand of the day, the organized crime is involved.
Thank you. And Commissioner, earlier on, in response to a question, you started to answer about dealing with some of the societal challenges, because if there wasn't a market, for example, for some of these drugs, then that profit margin wouldn't exist. Can you speak to some of the programs? And I would assume there are task force within your agency that are working on this with local partners on how best to actually deal with some of the roots of the markets of some of these illicit drugs in particular?
It would vary across the country, but the commanding officers, the RCMP commanding officers in each divisions, and the commanding officers for the federal regions work closely with the province to see what's required to make sure that there's the right support. Obviously, there's always a question of funding in that, but there's right support, and basically, how can you get the information out to the people who are actually using it?
Thank you. And President O'Gorman, can you speak to? We've had questions at this committee before. You provided, I think, in your last appearance, some of the numbers in terms of staffing levels. I know this continues to be a question that I would love to ensure that we have the most accurate and up-to-date numbers. It's my understanding that CBSA recruits something like 500 new agents every year. Is that accurate? And is it also accurate that the previous cuts of over 1,100 CBSA official agents or staff have been fully restored and additional officers or agents hired? Can you confirm some of those numbers for me, please?
So we can put through about 500 officers through our college every year. We're regaining after the pandemic where we had to close, so it's about 500 a year. Right now we've got 16,700 employees, 8,500 of whom are frontline officers.
But can you answer my question about the previous 1,100 CBSA agent cuts? Have they been restored, and in addition to more officers added? Because this seems to be a question of contention, and I would like to have some answers on that.
So our overall complement has increased.
Okay.
I'm afraid I can't answer the 1,100 specifically.
But overall, the complement has increased.
Yes, this is the most number of people we have had working at CBSA.
Ever?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Michaud, 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Thank you. 2 quick questions. Ms. O'Gorman, first question pertains to the demands of border agents saying that able to help out at the border during repatriation of certain individuals to ensure that things are done properly. Could this type of thing be present in the minister's plan that he's just tabled, in your opinion, or to your knowledge? I'm going to thank you for your question. I find it interesting that the union is saying that, except for an order in council that goes back to 81, if it didn't existed, we can repatriate tomorrow. But at the same time, we're missing thousands of officers. So you can't have both scenarios. So every day at the ports of entry, we carry out our mission, our mandate.
Who is carrying out its mandate. If the government provided CBSA with the resources and the mandate to do that, we would. But that's not my area of focus right now. My focus is the ports of entry, our people internationally,
the marine ports. Inland, we have 200 investigators. So that is my focus. Alors, juste pour être clair, je pense que c'est
So just to be clear, it's easy to say that's the only thing that prevents us from taking action, but now we are carrying out our mandate at the ports of entry throughout the country and throughout the world. So I thank you for your question and an opportunity to clarify a comment that was a little bit simplistic as far as I'm concerned. And as respect to the last time you said that you were adjusting to meet with the U.S. policy, and your organization provided a breakdown of this, and Trump referred to these examples. We see that more than 2 cars per hour. So the impact is greater than we thought it was. Is it possible at this point to begin dialogue once again with the U.S.? And I see that before 8 o'clock this morning, there's fewer people that go through than after later on in the evening. Is everything written in stone, or can you still talk to them and perhaps adjust the way we do things? That was an average. So as an average, I don't want to minimize for those individuals who used the ports of entry during this period of time. There was an impact for these individuals, but in this case, there's a port of entry that's not very far, so I know that adjustments need to be made. And I know that there's a lot of negotiations underway.
I think in a previous exchange with Mr. Lloyd, you reported roughly the number of 4,000 organized criminal or organized crime groups in Canada. And I'm going to assume that of those 4,000, I mean, that's on a spectrum. They don't all have the same capacity, members, et cetera. So amongst that 4,000, I think certainly there are some that operate in many different countries, and they have very organized and sophisticated distribution networks and so on. I guess what I'm wondering, Commissioner, is, in terms of like the resources that the RCMP has just specifically for organized crime, in your opinion, like what is the most effective way to combat organized crime? I mean, is it economic starvation, continuously interrupting their source of income? Because I'm just worried that a lot of the people who are getting arrested may be quite far down the organizational ladder. I'm just wondering, what do you need more from us in terms of going after the people who are the leaders of these organizations?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Just I want to clarify something, and Matt mentioned earlier the 4,000 number comes from CISC, who's a Criminal Intelligence Service Canada, and the definition of organized crime in the criminal code is a group of at least 3 individuals engaged in ongoing criminal activity for the purpose of making money. So I don't want to alarm everybody that way where it's so the definition is very. So to your point, Mr. McGregor, there's different. I think strong collaborative partnerships and intelligence sharing is one. Making sure it's not only in law enforcement, but I think we have to look at bringing a different perspective of who is better positioned to ensure that there's maximum impact to organized crime. Maybe it's Revenue Canada if you get into the books. Often the money laundering file does not start with the money laundering itself. It starts with the commodity, and then it leads you into money laundering. But definitely, if you cut off the source of income, that's where it's going to hurt the most.
Okay, thank you very much. We have about 15 minutes left, or sorry, 11 minutes left. So we're supposed to have 2 more 5-minute rounds. So if that works for everyone, we'll wrap up after that. Okay. All right. So Mr. Motz with 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just one question. I want to go back quickly to the people on the terror watch list who, the U.S. has intercepted down there. What have we done here in this country to tighten our border security so these terrorists aren't admitted in the first place?
So the scenario you cited were people going to the U.S. and being
I'm talking
turned
about
back.
the ones that they're in Canada already.
Right.
And so what are we doing to make sure that those on terror watch lists aren't allowed to continue to enter Canada?
Okay, but the statistics of people that the U.S. encounters and turns back, they may be Canadian as well. So I wouldn't take that whole number and say they are all foreign nationals into the country. So
I would agree. I would agree with that
Okay.
assessment.
And so to your point, your question, which is for those who have come from abroad who are foreign nationals in Canada being turned away. So certainly our colleagues from Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship would be well placed, but they have tightened up their visa requirements. Mr. McCrory can talk maybe a bit about the security screening process, if you'll.
Okay, yeah.
So yes, so I like to think of it as layers of defense that start prior to the border, and that's where, for example, IRCC requires a visa, and a portion of those are referred to us for security clearing. Okay. I think we did 34,000 applications last year, and had a non-favorable recommendation about 800 of them. Our national targeting.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you for a minute because we've heard some of these numbers before, and I know we all need to do. We all can agree we need to do a better job. But I just want to put a motion on notice before I pass the rest of my time to Mr. Lloyd. Chair, I'd like to put this motion on notice. Whereas break-and enters against small businesses in Toronto have risen 19% in the last year, and the Ottawa Police Service is warning of an alarming rise in residential break-and enters, the committee undertake a study on the issue of break-and enters and home invasions in Canada of not less than 3 meetings, and that the committee report these findings and recommendations to the House, and I would turn the remaining of my time over to Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Mutz. Mr. Lloyd, you have just under 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I also will be putting on notice of motion. Whereas new data shows that homicides in Canada have increased 27%, and the homicide rate has increased from 1.71 to 1.94 per 100,000 Canadians since 2015. The committee undertake a study on the causes of homicide in Canada of not less than 3 meetings, and that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House. With my remaining time, we know that where are these transnational organized crime groups majority coming from? Like what countries are they tied to generally?
You have the organized crime group based on CISC's report, 2024 report. You have organized crime groups that work within the country, and you have a percentage of, and I don't have the exact number, but you have a number of groups that have international ties, if you wish. When I look at, when we were talking about fentanyl earlier, we know that the Mexican cartel has a strong presence and are involved in the making and distribution.
Thank you. Maybe this is a question best for the CBSA. Can someone tell us what percentage of import containers are scanned at our ports, and what percentage of import containers are scanned at land crossings, and what percentage of containers are scanned at rail crossings?
So I don't have the percentage, and we would typically not speak publicly about how we do our targeting and the numbers we scan. So it depends on our risk. It depends on the information that we've received. So generally,
we did have a representative from the union that said that there's a 0% chance that anything will be scanned at a rail crossing. Is that true?
Yeah, again, disappointing that they felt the need to put that information out there without any more context. So I'm going to ask Mr. McCrory to address that quite directly. Thank you for the question.
So all goods coming into Canada need to be reported to the CBSA, and as the President alluded to, we do a risk assessment on all those goods. We also have targeting in certain modes that allow us to target. What I would say is that in any mode, when we have suspicion, either based on the targeting, our intel, or our risk assessment, or based on the experience of well-trained border services officers, we will pull that that.
Now, we know that the
conveyance
U.S.
aside and
discloses
search.
their percentages. Is there a reason why they can disclose their percentages, but Canada does not?
As I've suggested, we get data on all material coming into the country. We use that data to perform the risk assessments, and we prefer not to talk about how many actually will undergo an examination because we don't want to give away our methodologies.
Would it be a number that Canadians would consider high or a number that Canadians would consider low?
I think Canadians should take solace in the fact that we do a risk assessment on everything coming into the country.
Thank you very much. And with the remaining 5 minutes, we'll go to Mr. McDonald, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses again. Quickly, I just want to touch on Bill C-70, Canada's new Countering Foreign Interference Act, came into effect last June. How will the measures in that bill enhance the ability for CBSA to leverage intelligence at the border?
So I wouldn't say that CBSA is a central player in foreign interference, but I will say that we are an active member of the national security community, and we do have tools at our disposal, not least the ability to remove people. And as I understand foreign interference, that a criminal justice outcome is sometimes quite challenging to obtain. And so sometimes the best outcome is removing somebody who is engaged in that activity out of Canada. So we have relevant tools.
Thank you. And I know back in 2017, we introduced legislation allowing CBSA officers to inspect imported and exported mail weighing 30 grams. And I want to put this into context. And I'm asking, what is, or let me see, how many doses can be defined in approximately 30 grams of fentanyl?
So a small number of pills can be mixed with other things and made into several doses. So I don't think I could give you an exact equation. But the fact is people were sending pills through the mail.
Okay, thank you. And I just quickly, I know obviously your organizations have to be very agile. You mentioned at the beginning of this session that you're heading to Washington, D.C. In the near future. Can you talk a little bit about the positive things that are happening between the relationships between the U.S. and their organizations and your organizations, and what could be improved? And maybe each of you could take a quick run at that.
Sure, I'll start. The good things that are happening, we have people embedded in the U.S. Targeting Center, and they will be sending somebody to us starting in January, and we're quite pleased about that. We're coordinating our infrastructure investments, and I've already mentioned that. We're going to undertake a pre-clearance pilot that would have Canada Border Service officers co-locate on the U.S. side and pre-clear people before they come to Canada. And I'll say that's a pilot with the express purpose of seeing if it works. And that's, I think, quite important. And then working internationally. The first people when we send liaison officers out, in addition to meeting people in their host country, is to meet their U.S. Customs and Border Protection and DEA counterparts. So really, as I said, information is being shared all the time and to very good effect.
Thank you. Commissioner?
If I may add, from an RCMP perspective, at national headquarters, we have someone from the United States Border Patrol embedded at our national headquarters with our border team, as well as the U.S. Coast Guard. The relationship we have with them is strong. We're just building and even making them stronger. There's good sharing information. We're trying to align technology as well with USBP so we don't duplicate things and we can benefit from both sides of the border of the technology that's being used. So there's a lot of good work going on. And again, for myself and Aaron going down into Washington is really to meet the newly appointed people who are going to be responsible for it and build that relationship at the most senior level.
Thank you. Also, just curious, we heard that approximately 0.2% of fentanyl goes into the U.S. from Canada. Where's the 99.8% come from that goes into the U.S.?
Well, that so I have a report here from the USBP Homeland Security that dates back July of 2023, and it does cite in the report that Canadian-produced fentanyl cannot currently compete with Mexican-sourced fentanyl in the Pacific Northwest and is not currently known to enter the U.S. market at the retail level. And I've mentioned before that it's costing them 1/40th of the price that it's being done in Canada. So we strongly believe, based on the intelligence we have, and it's confirmed here by our USBP, that the Mexican cartel's flow of fentanyl is coming up towards the West Coast, and we believe that it's been predominantly used in the United States because of the cost versus the cost that we're producing it at.
Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Duhem, I have to mention that some of your former friends speak of you highly in your hockey ability and Tignish PEI when you were here. So not about your profession, just about the hockey. So I had to mention that. Look, I certainly appreciate your time. It's extremely important issues that you're dealing with. And we know that the innovation and technology that the criminals are advancing on a daily. You have to be very agile in what you're doing, and we appreciate all the work that you've done so far. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. And with that, we've ended our formal line of questioning. I just want to thank you very sincerely to all of you for being with us today. We know that you all work very, very hard on these important issues, and I'm certain the committee will be inviting you back in the coming months and years as we deal with the new challenges that are forthcoming. Thank you very much for your hard work. And if there's agreement, I'll adjourn the meeting. Yes, adjourn. Adjourned. Go ahead.